And I have a little handout. If you are interested, you can find it here. So Ian asked me to give a talk about memes, which I thought was very nice. But when he asked me, I immediately thought, like, I really shouldn't be doing this. I'm on the wrong side of 30 to be to be making memes. And also, everything I know about memes I learned from some former students of mine. And so I asked Ian if I could bring those two students. They're now in grad school. Ben's at Arizona and Mike's at Yale. And I remember Mike asking me in like 2015 or something what I thought about memes. And I was like, are you talking about Richard Dawkins? I literally had no idea. So then I subjected myself to their tutelage for like 2 or 3 years. And then I decided to start making my own memes. And like I said, it's been good fun. So here on this little handout, I decided I would just talk for a few minutes, super practically, about the process of like what I do when I make a meme. So here are some accounts you can follow. If there's a little @ sign in front of it, that's Instagram. Otherwise, it's Facebook. So this is how I procrastinate and waste time. I just look at memes and absorb memes, and then I think what happens is you like start picking up on what the inside jokes are and what the formats are, and then hopefully ways to apply that to philosophy spring to mind. Here are some nice free apps you can use to actually make memes on your phone. I use PixArt and InShot for video, and then of course there's Microsoft Paint for making memes. Yeah. All right, and then here are just some tips that I've acquired about humor, meme humor. I thought that the more specialized philosophical knowledge is required to appreciate the meme, the fewer people are going to get it and appreciate it. That makes sense. But sometimes you want to make the meme a little inside and actually make it educational. That means fewer people are going to get it and appreciate it, and that can be a little depressing. I've also found that self-deprecation and vulnerability and authenticity are endearing. People sort of like that if you are sort of sharing vulnerabilities about yourself. Also, less is more text-wise. It's often tempting to like put a ton of text in there, especially if you're trying to communicate ideas, but I think that kind of kills the joke a lot. Also, last point, I feel like good humor speaks truth to power, as they say, and good humor is subversive. But in academia, woke progressivism is super powerful. So I think it's more challenging to meme from the left. Even though progressivism is subversive in its own way, of like traditional moral frameworks, the problem is that that project is so pervasive and familiar to college-age students that it's not surprising or bold or funny. So it's a little bit easier to poke fun at that familiar sort of progressive subversion than in the other direction. So let me give you just a few examples of what I'm talking about, and then I will yield the floor to Ben and Mike. So like here's one example, making fun of philosophers. So here's just a picture of a guy building some wall, and then you imagine Trump offering philosophers who help build a wall, one publication in Phil Review. And I think that's funny because what it suggests is like philosophers' principles are sort of superficial, and if the incentive structure were slightly different, they would probably fall in the line in a different direction. Here's one that's kind of making fun of philosophy. This originally just said the long and awkward walk home after, I don't know, it was sort of inappropriate to show. It said the long and awkward walk home after awkward forest sex is what it said. But I was like, well, I can't share that. So I'll make this about philosophy, and I just changed it to ruining another date with philosophy. And a lot of people resonated with that. Like, okay, they know what I mean. And maybe you know what I mean. And then just finally, this is kind of a more recent format, somebody progressively becoming a clown. And then this is, I guess this is an example of what I mean when I say like sharing an authentic sort of vulnerability resonates with a lot of people. Thinking, what does this have to do with philosophy? How do philosophers get progressively more clownish? And then this is me doing therapy on myself. I was like going through tenure at the time. And I remembered thinking this, well, if I can just get into a good program, then I'll know I'm not an imposter. And that's a joke. If I could just get a good job, then I'll know this wasn't a waste. And I was like at this stage in my career. If I could just get tenure, then I'll feel safe and secure. Realizing that's probably not true either. And the last step is, maybe when I retire, I'll suddenly be happy. And then you're full clown. So that's all I wanted to say about memes. So I will now pass the mic to Ben.
Yeah.
Do you want to use this?
Yeah. Can you plug it in? I think it has some, there was like a Google thingy. With some memes in it. Okay. I just wanted to make a couple notes about memes and public philosophy. Seems relevant, right? So, I thought a little bit about philosophy of humor and why we find memes funny and why we find philosophy memes in particular very funny. So in philosophy of humor, there are a lot of different theories. One of them is this theory of superiority. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. Because it goes back to people like Hobbes. Thought that, when someone like slips on a banana peel and falls on their face, you laugh at them because you feel superior to them. And then there's another theory, like there's other theories about inside jokes. And inside jokes have sort of come up quite a bit in all of our discussions so far. And I think an important aspect of memes is that they're oftentimes like inside jokes for a very small group. And this can be a downfall for memes, as some people have said. But this can also be a positive thing for memes, I think. So I just want to sort of give a counterpoint to that that's not disagreeing or incompatible with what's been said before, because I appreciate everything that's everyone's said. Some like theories of humor, like including I think Ted Cohen has said this before, and Dan Dennett has said this before in a book that he has about inside jokes. That people find inside jokes funny because they know that they're part of this in-group, and then they know that there are people outside of the group that don't get it, and that adds to the humor, which sort of goes along with this superiority theory I was describing. Like, you sort of feel superior because you're part of this inside group that gets the joke. And so when memes are more specific, more specific and referencing something more obscure in philosophy, it makes them more inside jokes and less available to the wider public. And the people who get them find them really funny. But what this does is it sort of creates an incentive structure to learn about the memes and learn about what's going on in the memes so you can be part of the inside group. So I think this can be a really powerful tool for public philosophy. So, you see a meme and you don't understand it, then you want to sort of figure out what it's about so you can be in the group that understands it. This is my experience when I first started looking at memes. I was an undergrad at Pepperdine University, and I was actually I studied Spanish language literature and poetry and stuff, and then I had a philosophy minor. And I didn't really know what was going on in analytic philosophy, and I would look at monstrous metaphysics memes, and I didn't understand anything they were talking about, and there's all this formal stuff going on. Mike would often send me memes and be like, "Isn't this hilarious?" I'd be like, "I don't know what the fuck this means." It doesn't look like it's in English or Spanish. Because it had all this formal logic and stuff, but it sort of motivated me to want to learn about it. And around the same time, or slightly after this, the people at Monstrous Metaphysics Memes started citing the sources for their memes. So you have this incentive structure that makes you want to learn about the meme so that you can be a part of this in-group and understand this funny inside joke. And then when people running these meme pages add citations to the memes, it can create a really good environment for learning about philosophy, because you have this resource, and they're usually not linking to articles that you can't access. Oftentimes it's just plato.stanford.edu or whatever. So anybody who sees the meme and wants to understand it can take their best shot at understanding the meme by reading the thing that they're citing. Sometimes that'll be less easy. sometimes it will be more difficult, if we're talking about like a counterfactual semantics meme or whatever. But anyhow, basically what I wanted to say was just, this can be a positive thing for memes, while, them being too much of an inside joke can be exclusive to people and leave them outside of the group, and especially leave like people not in the academic philosophy tower, the tower of academia or whatever, can be excluded. It can also be a way to bring other people in by like sort of using their desires and the structure of like inside jokes in general to motivate people to learn more about philosophy. So that's basically what I was going to show a couple of memes. Here's one that I made. How do we make it? We have the proceedings of the Aristotelian Society, and then the proceedings of the Heraclitean Society. Now, if you know anything, the pre-Socratics are a lot more wild than Aristotle. And if you didn't know that, you might be motivated to look it up and see who the hell Heraclitus was, and then realize that he has some crazy views that are pretty interesting. I work in ancient philosophy, so a lot of my memes are mostly about ancient philosophy.
If you just click the next buttons on the side.
Oh, okay. Here's one. When you are a medieval scribe, you burn Aristotle's Patroclus, but keep Damascus' principles and solutions concerning the problems and solutions concerning first principles. The joke here is, it's an inside joke. Aristotle's famous dialogue, Patroclus, it was lost to history, destroyed, whatever. But this obscure text by this Neoplatonist, Damascus, is like well preserved by the medieval scribes, and no one cares about it these days, at least in American academia, because it's not Aristotle. But they had different priorities in medieval times. At any rate, so that's basically here. Let's see. Here's a good one. Okay, gang, let's see what consciousness really is. The water the whole time. That's Thales. Thales, another pre-Socratic. But you can learn, and if you see this, you're probably never going to forget that Thales was the guy who thought everything was water. But yeah. So anyhow, these are pretty obscure jokes, but they can. If you don't understand them, you can learn about them, learn about the context behind them, do a little reading. And then you have this deeper understanding, and it can pull you in order to get through. So that's all I have to say, right? Yeah. Thanks, y'all.
Yeah. So I'm not going to talk that much. I'll be really quick. I'm not going to talk that much about memes as public philosophy. I just have 5 questions to present about how memes will evolve in the next 5 to 10 years, things that I'm interested in the philosophy of memes themselves, or just in making empirical predictions about how the meme world or meme sphere, I don't know, I hate the technical jargon, but it's useful here, meme sphere, I guess, will evolve. So one question I have, there are certain memes where, so we can distinguish in a meme the template or the format from the content, right? So like Ben's meme with Thales there, the format is obviously the Scooby-Doo scene where they're unmasking the ghost. The content is this joke about Thales thinking everything's water, right? So one question that I have is there a meaningful distinction to be made between certain formats that take on a life of their own? So you can think most specifically of Doge, the Doge dog, or Doge, however you want to say him. He seems to be almost like an internet invented character with his own life story, his own lore, and stuff like that. And putting text on there in this funny way has sort of been lost to history about like why people like Doge. They like him because he's Doge, And it's hard to believe that could ever happen with the Scooby-Doo meme. They're already characters. They have their own existence outside the internet. But some memes, the format takes on a life of its own, and the content is lost. I think an interesting question is, why does that happen? Is there some deeper reason why that happens? Can we distinguish? Is there a meaningful? Is there a way we can analyze a meme format and determine ahead of time whether this has potential to be its own thing? So that's question number 1. Question number 2 is about abstraction. So there was a time where a really clever thing to do with a meme was just to make it more abstract. So like, what I mean by abstraction is make the content match the format less. The format ceases to really define what the content can be. The format's just used as like purely as a vehicle in the ultimate form of abstraction, where any content can be slapped on any format, and like all meaning between the connection between the content and the format has been lost. And it was like, for a long time, it seemed like that's where memes were going. It's like we were just going, the new in thing, or the most intelligent thing you could do with memes was to make them more abstract, more absurd, I guess, the absurdification of memes. And so my second question is just, have we reached a limit with that? Have we become saturated with this sort of, making memes more abstract, making them more absurd? Is there nowhere to go with that? No meaningful way, no meaningful place to take that beyond where it is now? Or will someone find a way, and we'll find this new way of building new memes from old memes, or new purposes for old templates by just making them more abstract? So the third question is related to that. It's the idea of irony. So when I think of ironic memes, what I think of is memes that last week people would think of as silly or stupid or made by people who are out of touch, now become the hottest thing on the meme market. Right? That's what I think of as irony. It's like sort of this reevaluation of what were previously thought to be terrible memes, crappy memes. And so like the third question is very similar to the second. Have we saturated that way of making new hit memes? Is there nowhere to go? Will we reach or have we reached the point where a meme today in the same day can be thought to be a boomer shit post and then be like meme gold by the end of the day? Like, is that where we are now, or is there still a further way to go? And then I guess you could add like on to those second and third questions. If we've reached the limit of both of these processes of creating new hit memes, will there be a new process that someone will come up that's sort of like ironic, like making the memes ironic or making them more abstract, more lost from the content of or the format of the meme? So the fourth question is about the sort of, you could call it the permittivity of the meme world or the meme sphere. So the question is like, we're seeing this sort of balkanization where there's people who get their memes from Facebook, there's people who get their memes from Twitter, there's people who get their memes from 4chan or whatever, And yet, yes, memes that become popular on Twitter are often going to be popular on Facebook as well very quickly, and that happens. And it's interesting to think about what would happen if we lost this sort of permittivity, and where memes that became popular on Facebook never made it to Twitter, memes that became popular on Twitter never made it to Facebook. How would this affect the idea that the importance of a meme is to make it shareable? Would this sort of undercut that? Would people lose interest in memes? Would they sort of just collapse into these in-jokes that never make it out of these spheres? Or will that have no effect at all? That's sort of the question. How will this balkanization of the meme sphere affect memes themselves? And what was my last question? Oh, my last question was about how memes will function in culture at large. So you can think about like when television was a thing, it was hit. Television came out, became this whole thing. Are memes the next step in culture? Is it the next newspapers, the next television? Will it have a place in culture that big in the next 10 years, or will it just collapse? Is this a passing fad? Seems less likely to be a passing fad since memes, like internet memes. I mean, this whole thing I've been talking about internet memes have been around for 20 years now, 15 years at least.
Yeah.
At least 15 years. So
At least 15.
Maybe 20. So it seems less likely to be a passing fad, but you never know. And so the question is sort of just a boring old empirical one. Will memes just become a dominant form of culture, a dominant medium of culture in the next 10 years or not? Or is this a very long-lasting flash in the pan phenomenon? So those are the 5 questions, abstraction, irony, permittivity of the meme sphere, larger role in culture, and then the relationship to format and sort of the making a meme a sort of internet character. So those are the 5 questions that I'm interested in the philosophy of memes. And I think it's good to think about when it comes to public philosophy, because you want to stay current with what's happening in the meme sphere. Having answers to these questions would put you ahead of the curve, I guess. But I have no way to answer these questions. They're meaningful to me. I don't know if they're meaningful to you. So I'll leave them with you.